Welcome to my channel, The Good Book Tales. Today we are diving into a story that has fascinated generations. A story of courage, faith, and divine power. It is the incredible story of Prophet Elijah, a man whose life was filled with extraordinary events, unshakable faith, and moments that defied human understanding. Imagine standing on the edge of a world where kings challenge God, prophets face deadly enemies, and a single voice of truth can shake entire nations. This is the world that Elijah walked in, a world where obedience to God could bring both unimaginable danger and miraculous triumphs. Elijah's story begins in the kingdom of Israel, a land torn between loyalty to God and the seduction of false idols. The king of that time, Ahab, along with Queen Jezebel, had led the nation down a path of corruption and idolatry, worshipping Baal and turning away from the one true God. In the midst of this chaos, a lone prophet rises. Elijah, a man chosen to confront evil, speak truth to power, and remind the people that God's presence was not gone. From the very first moment, Elijah's life is anything but ordinary. He doesn't fit the mold of kings or generals. He is a shepherd, a man of solitude, yet his words and actions carry the weight of heaven itself. But what makes Elijah's journey so incredible isn't just the miracles or confrontations. It's the human struggles he faces along the way. He wrestles with fear, doubt, and isolation, yet somehow finds the courage to stand against forces far greater than himself. He challenges false prophets in dramatic showdowns, calls down fire from the sky, and demonstrates a faith so powerful that even nature seems to obey him. And yet, behind these miraculous acts lies a deeply relatable story. A story of a man trying to navigate a world filled with moral decay, personal risk, and divine expectations. As we explore Elijah's incredible life, we'll witness moments that seem impossible. Droughts, mountains shaking with fire, and messages from God that defy logic. But with every triumph, new dangers emerge, and the stakes grow higher. Will Elijah survive the wrath of Jezebel? Can he turn the hearts of an entire nation back to God? And what secret message does he carry that will change not only Israel, but generations to come? In this video, we'll journey through the incredible highs and terrifying lows of Elijah's life. We'll uncover hidden lessons, explore the power of faith, and understand why his story remains one of the most compelling tales in history. But right now, as the winds howl across the wilderness and the tension in Israel reaches a boiling point, Elijah stands alone on the edge of a monumental confrontation. One that will challenge not only his courage, but the very heart of God's justice. Stay with me, because what happens next will shock you, inspire you, and leave you questioning the limits of human courage and divine power. Elijah's world was not one of comfort or ease. The kingdom of Israel was divided, not just politically, but spiritually. People whispered in the streets about the power of Baal, a god who promised rain and fortune, while the true God seemed silent. Families were torn apart, neighbors argued over worship, and the air was thick with fear and uncertainty. In this turbulent time, Elijah's presence was both a beacon and a threat. He was a man whose loyalty to God was absolute, yet the path he walked was littered with danger at every turn. We often forget that behind the stories of miracles and fire from heaven, there was a man, Elijah, who felt fear just like any of us. He wandered the hills and deserts, surviving on what little he could find, listening to the whispers of the wind and the quiet guidance of God. It was in these moments of solitude that he prepared for the trials ahead, knowing that speaking the truth could cost him everything. Every step he took, every word he spoke, carried the weight of the unseen, a power far greater than any king or army. The people around him were not simple spectators either. King Ahab and Queen Jezebel ruled with iron fists, enforcing the worship of false gods and punishing those who dared to resist. Prophets of Baal crowded the temples, performing rituals meant to awe and intimidate, while ordinary citizens struggled to choose between fear and faith. Elijah stood against all of this, a solitary figure facing impossible odds. His challenge was not just a battle of words, but a test of belief, courage, and endurance. Every confrontation could spark conflict. Every miracle could incite anger. And yet, the prophet pressed on. And yet, the story of Elijah is more than battles and divine signs. It is about the tension between hope and despair. The tension between the visible world ruled by men and the invisible world ruled by God. The tension between a prophet's loneliness and the immense responsibility placed upon his shoulders. With each passing day, the danger grew, the suspense thickened, and the question loomed larger. Would Elijah be able to stand firm when the ultimate test came? Would he confront the forces aligned against him, or would fear force him into hiding once again? As the clouds gather over Israel, signaling storms that no one yet understands, Elijah prepares for what could be the most dramatic moment of his life. A confrontation that will not only define his destiny, but could decide the fate of an entire nation. And in the silence of the desert, with only the wind as his companion, he senses that the moment is coming, one that will push him beyond every limit he has known. Elijah knew that standing alone against Ahab and Jezebel was more than just a physical challenge. It was a battle for the hearts and minds of the people. Every village he passed seemed caught between fear and curiosity, with whispers following him like shadows. Some villagers secretly admired his courage, while others feared the wrath that might fall upon them for even showing sympathy. The tension was palpable. One wrong word could bring disaster, not just on Elijah, but on everyone who dared to listen. Meanwhile, in the palaces of Israel, Jezebel's fury grew with each report of Elijah's actions. She was a queen who did not tolerate opposition. Every miracle he performed, every prophecy he declared, was a threat to her power and the authority of the false prophets she supported. The struggle between Elijah and the royal court was no longer just a personal conflict. It had become a battle between truth and deception, between God's voice and the voices of those who sought to mislead an entire nation. Even among Elijah's own people, doubts stirred. Some questioned whether one man could really make a difference. Others feared that by following him, they were inviting destruction upon themselves. This internal conflict mirrored the larger struggle, creating a web of tension that touched every corner of Israel. As Elijah prepared for the next step in his mission, he sensed that the coming confrontation would not only test his faith, but would also reveal the hidden loyalties, fears, and hopes of everyone around him. Every glance, every whispered conversation, and every act of defiance could tip the balance. The storm was gathering, not in the sky, but in the hearts of men, and Elijah stood in the eye of it, knowing that soon the moment would arrive when nothing could remain the same. The day had arrived that Elijah had been preparing for, the day when truth would stand face to face with deception. The air was heavy with tension as the people of Israel gathered on Mount Carmel, their eyes shifting nervously between the prophets of Baal and the lone figure of Elijah. Every heartbeat seemed louder than the last, every whisper a reminder of the stakes at hand. This was not just a contest of power. It was a confrontation that would decide the future of an entire nation. Elijah's gaze swept across the crowd, reading the fear, the doubt, and the flickers of hope in their eyes. Behind him, the prophets of Baal were ready, their chants growing louder, their rituals frantic, desperate to prove their God's power. They mocked, they shouted, and they tried to intimidate. But Elijah stood calm, unwavering. He knew that this was more than a display, it was a test of faith, a moment where the invisible hand of God might show itself in a way that could not be ignored. Every detail of the scene seemed designed to amplify the suspense. The dry wood piled for the sacrifice, the altar waiting in the center, the crowd holding its breath. Even the sky seemed to pause, as if nature itself sensed the weight of what was about to unfold. Behind the spectacle, the personal stakes pressed in on Elijah. Years of solitude, danger, and doubt had led him to this moment. Every threat he had faced, every fear he had wrestled with, all pointed to this single confrontation. And yet, even with all preparations made, uncertainty lingered. Could one man truly stand against an entire nation's corruption? Could faith alone prevail when the world around him seemed ready to collapse? The tension reached a breaking point as silence fell over the mountaintop. Every eye turned to Elijah, every soul waiting, knowing that the next moment could change everything, but exactly how, no one yet knew. Just as the tension on Mount Carmel reached its peak, a murmur rippled through the crowd. Elijah sensed it immediately, a subtle shift in the atmosphere, a shadow moving along the edges of the assembly. He turned slightly, scanning the faces of the people around him. Then he saw her, Jezebel's emissary, a messenger sent to threaten and intimidate anyone who dared stand against the queen's rule. In an instant, the stakes multiplied. This was no longer only about proving whose God was true. Now it was about survival, about the danger of defying power in the human realm, as well as the divine. The prophets of Baal sensed it too. Their chants faltered for a split second, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. For the first time, even they hesitated, sensing that Elijah's presence was more than ordinary courage. It carried something they could not control. The crowd leaned forward, tension so thick it felt like a living thing pressing down on everyone. Mothers clutched their children, elders whispered prayers under their breath, and even soldiers exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of what might happen next. Elijah felt a surge of both fear and resolve. Years of wandering, of facing impossible odds, of speaking truth in the face of lies, had brought him to this precise moment. But now, with Jezebel's threat looming like a storm on the horizon, he realized the confrontation would be even more dangerous than he had imagined. The messenger's words were blunt: step down or face consequences that would ripple far beyond this mountain. Yet Elijah's faith would not waver. Every instinct screamed caution, but he knew that yielding would mean betraying everything he had stood for. As he readied himself, the natural elements seemed to join the suspense. A wind stirred across the mountaintop, dry leaves skittering like tiny messengers of warning. The sky darkened ever so slightly, though no storm had been predicted. Every detail amplified the sense that something monumental was about to happen, something that could change the destiny of Israel forever. The crowd, the prophets, and even the messenger held their breath, waiting for the first move, knowing that one action, one word, could ignite events that no one could undo. And in that heavy silence, Elijah sensed it. The battle was no longer just a contest between men or gods. It was a test of courage, faith, and the very heart of the nation itself. The moment of truth was almost here, and with it, the unexpected twists that would leave everyone questioning what they thought they knew about power, destiny, and the unseen hand guiding the world. The mountaintop fell into a tense, almost unbearable silence. Elijah stood before the altar, every nerve alert, every breath measured. The prophets of Baal were shouting, dancing, and striking themselves in a desperate attempt to summon a response from their God. But nothing happened. Hours passed, their voices growing hoarse, their frustration mounting, while the crowd watched, teetering between fear and awe. And then Elijah spoke, his voice calm yet powerful, cutting through the chaos. "Come near and see the power of the one true God." He arranged the wood, poured water over the altar, soaking it until it glistened and ran down the sides, and then knelt in prayer. The people watched in stunned silence, unsure what would happen next. Then, in a moment that seemed suspended in time, fire fell from heaven, consuming the sacrifice, the wood, even licking up the water surrounding the altar. The crowd gasped, their fear and awe mingling into an overwhelming wave of realization. This was not just a miracle. This was a sign that faith and truth could stand against deception and corruption. The prophets of Baal fell silent, stunned into disbelief. Even the messenger from Jezebel could not hide a flicker of fear as the power of God's presence became undeniable. Elijah's unwavering faith had not only proven God's supremacy, but had inspired the hearts of the people, shaking them from complacency and fear. For a moment, it seemed as though the nation itself had taken a collective breath, the tension that had gripped Israel finally breaking. Yet, as Elijah turned to speak to the crowd, a sudden, unexpected shadow crossed the horizon. A distant messenger arrived, bearing news from the northern lands, news that threatened to undo the triumph of the day. A new threat had emerged, one that even Elijah could not foresee, one that would challenge not only his courage, but the very faith of Israel once again. The people cheered, but the shadow of danger reminded them that even the greatest victories could carry the seeds of new trials. Elijah looked out over the assembly, fire from heaven still smoldering at his feet, and knew that this was only the beginning. Faith, courage, and the power of God had triumphed today, but the journey was far from over. The winds of challenge were already rising, and the prophet's next steps would demand even greater resolve as the story of Elijah's incredible life continued to unfold in ways no one could yet imagine. After the fire fell from heaven, and the crowd witnessed the undeniable power of God, a calm settled over Mount Carmel. The people, once caught between fear and doubt, now began to whisper among themselves, their hearts stirring with hope. Elijah had not only proven the supremacy of the one true God, but he had reminded the nation that faith, courage, and unwavering belief could overcome even the darkest of challenges. The prophets of Baal were defeated, their voices silenced, and the people began to turn away from idols, reconsidering the choices they had made under fear and deception. Elijah took a moment to breathe in the quiet, the weight of the day pressing upon him. He thought of the long years of wandering, the solitude of the wilderness, and the countless dangers he had faced. Every step had led to this moment, but he knew that the work of guiding hearts back to God was far from over. True change, he understood, came slowly, one choice at a time, one act of faith at a time. Yet the events of that day had ignited a spark that could not be ignored. Even as celebration began, Elijah's thoughts turned to the messenger from the northern lands, the new threat that had emerged. Life, he realized, was never truly free from challenge, but it was the courage to face those challenges that defined a person. The story of Elijah was a story not just of miracles, but of human resolve, perseverance, and the willingness to stand for truth, even when the odds seemed impossible. His journey showed that faith was not passive. It required action, courage, and a heart willing to trust in the unseen. As the sun began to set over Mount Carmel, casting golden light across the altar and the gathered crowd, Elijah looked out over the land he had worked to protect. There was still much to do, but the day had proven that one man, guided by God and anchored in faith, could indeed make a difference. The nation would remember this day, the miracle that defied logic, and the courage of a prophet who refused to bow to fear. And in that memory, the people would find a lesson that transcended time, that faith, hope, and unwavering belief can illuminate even the darkest paths. Elijah's story ended on Mount Carmel, but its message would echo through generations, a reminder that courage and faith are never wasted, that the power of God can be seen when hearts are open, and that the incredible journey of one faithful prophet could inspire countless others to stand for what is right, no matter the cost.